Good evening and welcome to the RSU 14 Wyndham Raymond School District Board of Directors meeting. Today is January 31st, 2018, and the time is 6:31. And Sandy, may I have a roll call?
You sure can. Kate Bricks.
Here.
Eric Colby.
Present.
Jenny Cummins. Don Dillon. Diana Forsland.
Here.
Marge Gavoni.
Here.
Pete Hensler.
Here.
Anna Kinney.
Here.
Scott McLean.
Here.
Genevieve Dellon.
If you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I do have one adjustment to the agenda to make. We are not going to be having the report of the secretary. We found some errors in the minutes that need correcting, so we will just do it next time. Okay. At this point, we'd like to open the microphone for any public input. Alrighty then, moving right along. We have a special guest this evening. Mr. Jack Fitch is here from Jordan Small Middle School to tell us about the stock market game that he's been doing for many years. And he also brought some special guests with him who had a trip to Washington last year.
Hi, I teach at Jordan Small, been there for many, many years. We've been playing the stock market game for many years, and the boys that I brought today, Jacob Goslant, Lucas Oldershaw, there were three other boys part of their team. It was Brian Mank, Brandon Mank, and Noah Maines. And we, at the beginning of the year, we play different stock market games. We play a fall game, we play a year-long game, we play a diversification game where they have to buy bonds and mutual funds. Not only just the stocks, but they have to have all of those different things in their portfolio. And so last year, we have 10 teams that they give us to play the Capitol Hill Challenge. They put a representative or a senator with us. They combined us with Shelley Pingree. And we've been playing the Capitol Hill Challenge for 14 years. Usually there's 4,000 to 6,000 teams in this game. And one of my things on my bucket list was yes.
Can you be heard? Are you near enough to the mic? Okay.
I can
Want me
hear
to go
you,
over
but
here?
Okay.
it would be
Okay.
great.
I just wanted to make sure everybody heard
Sure.
you.
Sure. So one thing on my bucket list was before I got done teaching, I'd like to take a group of students to Washington. Or I should say it the other way. I'd like to have a group of students take me to Washington. And so last year they got into the stock market game, and it's an 8-week game, and they have $100,000, and they have $50,000 that they can borrow. It's a diversification game, which means they have to have at least one bond. They have to have one mutual fund, and then they have that $150,000 that they can spend. And what they've learned, good. And there's two other boys, Brian and Brandon Mank. And what they did is they, through the first 7 weeks or 8 weeks of the game, we were probably in 100th place, and that was our best team. And then they hit a stock that just took off. And they ended up in 8th place for that game. I don't know who was more excited. I was pretty excited. The boys were excited. The people at SIFMA were really excited. They've never had a 5th grade team there before. And when they first heard we were 5th grade, they said they can't go. They don't qualify. They have to be a middle school. And I said, well, we are a middle school. So that was the thing that kind of saved us. And we were going to come and talk to you earlier, but I was waiting for a video from the SIFMA Foundation, and it came in probably a month ago. So we were trying to think of a day that would be good, or a night to come and talk with you. And I just wanted to introduce you to the boys. So That's the paper that I handed out to you is a paper from Susan Collins. office, and let me show you the video. I hope. There we go. And this video is, for 4 minutes, is mostly our boys.
The SIFMA Foundation is dedicated to financial education. Our goal is to ensure that young people of all ages across the country get an opportunity to learn about the capital markets, prepare for their financial futures, and learn to make decisions before they actually have to make those decisions, so they understand the consequences and have an opportunity to benefit from all of the wonderful opportunities inherent in the capital markets.
I think it's very, very important because you get to learn about the markets at a very, very young age. And the more you understand the markets and the industry, when you understand it when you're younger, it makes sense and it helps you to choose just different investment vehicles.
The capital markets and Wall Street and Main Street really are all about job creation. And that's what SIFMA is. I mean, they are a central part of all of the conversations here in Washington and Wall Street.
You guys are providing a lot of different experiences. Got a presentation from RBC, understand what different industries are like, and so it kind of gives us exposure into a ton of different verticals.
Lucas, team captain, small, strong but silent. He's doing calculations now on the price-earnings ratio of Exxon.
The SIFMA Foundation Stock Market Game Program is a wonderful opportunity for students to engage in multidisciplinary learning. It gives them an opportunity to really dive in to not only personal finance topics, but math, the use of technology, the ability to collaborate in teams to make decisions. All of these are skills that will serve them well in their adult lives.
I don't know, I was really excited. He was in our classroom a couple weeks ago, so it'll be really cool to see him again. And
I guess to see him in his state. I mean, he came and visited us in our classroom, but it's completely different than him doing his own work in his office and doing what he does best.
Did it go up by like 2% or 3%?
23%.
Whoa, will you take over my savings and manage it?
I'm really proud and excited today to announce that Schwab, our firm, is issuing a grant of $1 million to the SIFMA Foundation to underwrite this Capitol Hill Challenge.
When I watch those young, eager minds talk about the difference that they're making, we're teaching them at an early age how to be winners and how to learn about financial literacy and protecting their financial status.
As I teach my kids, you don't build wealth to get stuff and things. You build wealth to help others and to share and help those that are in need. And so I think when you teach individuals, especially young individuals, these things, and they understand the philosophies, they understand to build wealth, but to use that wealth in a really responsible way, that's what makes us happy, and that's what makes this exciting, and that's what makes this worthwhile.
So just, they do that every year after the Capitol Hill Challenge. And so they were a little bit late this year sending that out, but it was a great video for the boys. And pretty proud of them. They've done a nice job. They were great in Washington. The videographer followed our team around the whole time. They didn't want to follow any of the high school teams around because they never knew what the boys were going to do. And it was just a great experience wherever we went. We were fed at lunchtime. We were at some financial building, and they're feeding us there. They fed us in the morning. They took us out to a nice meal the last night there. And the kids, the high school kids, really watched over our kids. And I think they had a great time with them at the end. And with a lot of the pictures that we took, it was just fun to watch them all. One person in particular just stayed around our boys the whole time. And it was a great experience for me, a great experience for the boys. We had parents with us. They told us that parents couldn't go with the kids. And so Jen Maines Said, well, I'm gonna go until they tell me I can't be with them. So she stayed with us the whole time. And so it was really nice to have her with us. And near the end of the only drawback of the whole trip was we had our flight canceled the morning we were supposed to be there. We were supposed to be the first team in Washington. And so about 3 o'clock in the morning, I got a call from United. It said, your flight's been canceled. And we were supposed to leave like at 7 in the morning. We were going to be in Washington at 8:30. And I'm thinking, now what do I do? So I couldn't get a hold of one of the parents. We got a hold of most everyone. We had some grandparents that brought Brian and Brandon to the airport. They were ready to go at 5 or 6. We left at 7 o'clock at night. Got there, we were the last team there. And they were great to us the whole time. They felt so poorly that we couldn't be there with the rest of them because we missed the presentations. They had awards, they had a nice plaque, they had medals, and during our visit with Shelley Pingree, we presented her with her plaque because she was part of our team. And so a lot of nice things happened. I wish you could have seen the interview with Angus King. It was the best interview. They couldn't believe it. Those 5 boys hung on Angus King like he was their grandfather. He was just about done with his talk with the boys, and he looked at Lucas, and he said, "You're not saying anything. Don't you have any questions?" And Lucas said, "Yeah, I have one. What are you going to do about global warming?" And he was so great. He pulls out his iPhone. He says, I'm glad you asked it. I was in Greenland 5 years ago, and look at this glacier. And they're all looking at the glacier. And then he says, and I was in Greenland last year. Now look at the glacier. And the conversation, the give and take between the boys and Angus King was awesome. So these are the boys that went, and we just wanted to share this with you.
That's quite an accomplishment. That's very, very cool. Can you bring the boys up so they can introduce themselves?
Yes.
You're on TV. It's your 5 minutes of fame.
I think they've already had that.
Come on, right.
I say they had way better than this.
Let's see who you are.
I'm Lucas Oldershaw.
I'm Jacob Ghostland.
Jacob Ghostland.
I am Brandon Mink.
Brian Mink.
And again, we just had a great time. It was a great experience. Yes?
Well, first of all, congratulations. You've definitely done the district proud. I just got to know, though, how do you select your stocks? What kind of strategies do you use?
Usually we all play. The only game we all played together was the Capitol Hill. The other games we usually spread out, find stocks for ourselves, and at the end of the game, all of our good stocks that we've had a good time, we usually bring together, and that's usually how we pick our stocks. That's my opinion.
In order to prevent lossage of the money in the game, we didn't diversify much, but so we just kept our stocks still for a while.
Thank you.
Come on. I know he wants to walk up.
Most math classes, we start first 15 minutes off of every math class with the stock market. And what they do is they share stocks that they like. Some stocks they don't share because they want the money from that stock. You know, we've had, this year we have a 5th grade girl that bought 1,000 shares of a stock she read about on Seeking Alpha. She bought 1,000 shares. That day it went up $56 a share. The next day she came in and she sold it. She took her profits, and so she's in first and will probably win the year-long game. Our school, and it's not me, I don't tell them what to buy. If I say something, they don't do it. So it's their portfolio. They take care of their portfolio, and we've been the top investing school in the state, high schools included, over the last 3 years. Wow. That's how good they are.
That's true what he said. We don't listen at all to him. But one of our stocks that is still going up and is still making money in one of our games, and mine, is LUV. It's a Southwest Airlines. Last year it made us around 3,000, and that's one of the stocks that got us into 8th place.
Wow.
Good company.
Jack, I have a question.
Sure.
Does anybody else in the district do the stock market game?
We have four of our classes do at Jordan Small, and Wyndham Middle School used to. But it's when you talk about it, I've offered to help out with people that want to, but if you're not sure what's going on in the stock market, it's pretty intimidating for a teacher, for kids. But I go to a lot of schools and I talk about the stock market. So I'm a SIPMA Foundation. I help them out when they need me. Somebody to go in school talk about the stock market. Yeah, but it's the other nice thing I thought I would let everyone know is we also have a writing assignment that's done twice a year, and it's the Invest Right competition. About 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we won like 3 years in a row. With the writing, just great writing. And the last 3 years, we did just nothing. And so I was calling the person that represents or is the representative for SIFMA for New England. And I called him today. He says, I got some good news. He said, one of your students won the Invest Right. So we're back on to winning, and we'll put another banner up in our gym.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
And
very much.
I don't know who the person is, so he says, I'll call you in a couple of days, let you know who it is.
That's awesome.
That's great.
That is great program. Any other questions for our group?
I don't know, how do we get in on it with you? You want to share?
I have something to say. So when we were in the Capitol Hill Challenge last year, we had a stock called Cala. On the last day of the stock market game, we made $7,000 with it. I checked it yesterday, and it was going from the red zone all the way up to $7.36.
Wow.
In the green zone.
I think we see some future brokers.
Yeah. On the last day, Mr. Fitch let us stare at Cala for the whole hour and a half.
We had our iPhones, and so they had all their stocks in their iPhone. So I was doing the same thing because I knew we were close to going to Washington. So we've got our iPhones out and say, hey, did you see what's going on? Did you see what's going on? So they're looking at their iPhones, checking their stocks all day long.
I do have one more quick one too. You said that they started with 100,000 and they could also borrow up to 50,000. Did you do any of the borrowing to leverage?
We borrow everything. We spend, when we're investing, it's not the way you'd invest and they know it, but when we're trying to win a game, we borrow everything and we take maximum risk. If you look at our teams, now we have 50 teams in every game. We have all the 5th graders playing, all the 6th graders playing, any 7th and 8th graders that want to play. And what they do is the 7th and 8th graders are fun because they've already played it for 2 years. They don't have enough time in their regular classes to check their stocks. So as soon as they get their portfolio, they go to all of their stocks that they like, buy them, and then they leave it alone. So those stocks are there in their portfolio. And 2 or 3 of the 8th graders have won like that. They've let their portfolio win for them. They've taken really high quality growth stocks. So pretty impressive. They're good investors, and it's interesting the number of adults that call me and say, thanks for doing the stock market with me, and that are invested. The last boy that called me is in Florida, and he texted me and he said, I'm doing great. I said, you should be. Everyone is right now.
That's neat.
When we ended the Capitol Hill, we thought we were in either 13th, 12th, or 11th. That's what it said, and we were so close. And then when the final things came in, we were so surprised when we were in 8th place because some of the people didn't play the game right. They didn't have a bond or a mutual fund, or they didn't diversify.
And there was one school from Pennsylvania that had 5 teams in the top 10.
Wow.
And you can only send 1 team from the school. And so when we got there, we were talking to their teacher, and he said, you want to see something interesting, see how important the stock market game is to them? The team that was in the lead the next to last day were the football players from the football team. They lost the last day and another group went. He says, you've never seen a group of boys cry like they cried. Because they had the lead for so long, and it meant that much to them.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming, you guys. Quite an accomplishment. Okay, next on our agenda, we have Randy Crockett from Jordan Small Middle School and Beth Peavy from Raymond Elementary School to provide some updates.
It's a hard act to follow, Randy.
Yeah.
I know, I have no investigative advice for you whatsoever.
Yeah, tell us how well you've done.
Nice modest little 3%.
Yeah.
Give you a laptop.
See him calling the kids out of the office now. So, what did you take? Okay, back to class.
I can
He
take
does
it back.
take tips from us.
See?
He does.
You won't get blamed if it gets lost.
That's right, you have a child that played and got an award, right?
She won
Yeah.
in 5th grade. She won that writing one.
Don't worry, I'm not doing a PowerPoint. I do have one thing I want to show you. So. So I thought I'd give you a reference, a handout just as a reference. I'm not going to read it to you, but I'm going to highlight a few things and share a few things. And I'm not sure if that projector's going to cooperate right now, but I don't need it just yet. So this year, a lot of our initiatives at both schools are really connected to district initiatives because it's a lot of work. There's a lot of pieces to them. So as far as getting things rolling with math, I looked at the MEA scores, and they finally came out this fall. And overall, the school is doing pretty well, beating the state average in reading, way above in science, but math not so good. We were a bit below. And then looking down a little further into that, our 5th grade group last year, current 6th graders, we only had 17% of them at the proficiency level or above, which is, like kind of a gasp and what the heck's going on experience. So the state average was fairly low for 5th grade. Nonetheless, we were well below that. So we've been really focusing in on why, what happened, and trying to sort that out. So we're looking at NWA data with that same cohort of kids and looking at how they're performing right now in class. And we also do progress monitoring. We have a MComp and MCAP, which is concepts and applications, 2 different sort of short diagnostic type tests. And what we found so far is that the MEA results seem to be unusually low compared to how they're doing on those other measures. So they look solidly average as a group on those other measures, and then trying to figure out what's different about the MEA versus the NWA, which is an online test that's multiple choice, and just trying to figure out what skills or what practices are missing. So I mean, that's a broader conversation for math across the district, of course, but for us right now, it's trying to figure out what do we need to do differently, perhaps for grade 5 in general, and then this particular cohort of kids that are now in grade 6 specifically. So we're using everyday math pretty, I say religiously, but with great validity. We use everyday math. And one of our 5th grade math teachers is doing the new version of that this year to see if that sequence and that focus with the Common Core now it's updated to the Common Core. So to see if that has any bearing on it. Also looking at the sequence of units in terms of when the MEA tests occur, which is March to early April. And looking at, if we're spending a lot of time on fractions in May and June, because that's where it is in everyday math, but the test happened a month before, that kind of gives you an indication of maybe things need to change. So there's a lot of work going on, I know you realize, at the district level around this, and we'll obviously be dovetailing into that. But in the short term, it was trying to look at that cohort. And there's also been a fair amount of work done over the last year and a half with 7th and 8th grade math and looking how that transition goes into high school. So right now we have 11 students, 11 8th graders in geometry, and we have 12 8th graders in algebra, and about 20 students who are in pre-algebra. So the hope would be that all students are algebra ready when they head to high school. And obviously we have some that are already at that sort of benchmark. So that, I think you look at that and you say, well, we're doing a pretty good job preparing our students in math to go off to high school. But clearly there's some more work that needs to happen. So part of the 8th grade work this year has been to build on what they started last year, about halfway through the year, with working with the 9th grade teachers and the Wyndham Middle School teachers and using common assessments, midterms and finals, for instance, and sometimes other things to make sure that if you're taking algebra as an 8th grader, you're getting the same skill set as you would as a 9th grader, so that there isn't any gap or lag when they move on to the next level of math when they hit high school. So that's some really good ongoing work. And of course, there'll be more things around math very soon, I suspect. Lucy Calkins' writing in both buildings is still a big focus. We're in year 3, more or less. Some people were a little ahead of the curve. Others were a little reluctant, but I would say everybody's in year 2 at the very least, and many teachers are in year 3, so it's become more just part of their instruction and understanding the language of the units of study program and so forth, looking at which units are critical by grade level, and that's partly related to what they're going to be assessed on in the MEA writing. So for instance, 8th grade has to do persuasive, argumentative type essay to portray their point of view on a certain topic. And so that unit always gets done as a precursor to working with that when the MEA comes along, things like that. So we're looking at, how do we get all the pieces in. English language arts is like the most daunting curriculum for a teacher because there's just so many components to it. And they always feel like there's not enough time in the day to do them all well. Like, do I need to work on the reading piece right now? We're doing some new things in 5th and 6th grade with grammar and vocabulary, using a series that's relatively short but nicely targeted. So it'll be interesting to see how that pays off. And helping students kind of ramp up the vocabulary and really making sure they have those conventions of writing solid. And we've worked for many years across the school to say, just because you're not in ELA class right now doesn't mean you don't have to use correct punctuation and capitalization, and they probably get sick of hearing it, but that expectation goes for making your artist statement in art class, and it goes for your written work in phys ed or health or anywhere else, that we have these conventions of writing, and that's just the way it's supposed to be. So that's a work in progress, because if you're used to texting and not capitalizing and some things like that, it's a little different. So that's ongoing. Habits of work, guiding principles and grading practices. So we had district committees working last year. Several members of Jordan Small and RES were on those various groups. So we're, I would say, fully implemented with habits of work. Particularly grades 4 and up, because it's not new it's not a new practice for them. Years ago, we called it their effort grade. That was probably 6 or 8 years ago. And we've had different names to capture all of it, but now that it's kind of uniform across the district. And I feel pretty confident that most of the staff is really well versed in how to handle that, so that when they're scoring students on habits of work, it's not crossing over into their knowledge of the content area, and that's the critical piece. Like those things that help you succeed as a student, but are not necessarily specific to your knowledge in that subject. So we have, the rubric that is used now across middle school level, and the categories are classroom responsibility, academic responsibility, social skills, and perseverance. And I was really happy to see the last one, the committee, focusing on perseverance, because, that's critical to me more than sometimes what your skill set is. Can you persevere? And we spend a lot of time with the kids talking about growth mindset. And, we expect that you're not going to know how to do this. That's why we have school. So it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. We're here to learn, and that means you're going to struggle a little bit sometimes, and you have to persevere through that. So that's all a big part of that. The guiding principles are a work in progress at the middle school level. So I don't know if you can see this all that well, but what we're doing right now is taking inventory. So the letters on the chart are the initials of the teacher who is indicating that they assess something in their content area that also connects to a guiding principle. So I had the staff work with a partner or two and kind of present their opinion of what they might be doing in a class at a certain grade level that also ties into guiding principles. And their partner or partners had to kind of say, yes, I agree, or, well, that's not really that deep. It's kind of, maybe it's related, but you're not really assessing it. So there was some vetting amongst the staff. So this was our first step. So this happens to be 8th grade. The guiding principles are over here on the left. So the clear and effective communicator, self-directed, lifelong learners, those pieces. And then there were indicators that we borrowed from the state. And Christine Hessler originally put this chart together a couple of years ago, and I kind of stole it and used it with her permission, So, for instance, Mrs. Valley is saying in ELA, students are expected to use evidence and logic appropriately in communication, for this one. Likewise, we see it shows up in health and art, obviously in a different way, but it's interrelated. So this was sort of the first round. Take inventory. So it's a quick and easy way to say, perhaps in this particular area here, creative and practical problem solver, we don't have that many places where it shows up in a lot of different classes. Some of the music classes, some of the science classes, but that might be an area we want to focus in more in the future and say, what can we do to build on that more? Likewise, responsible citizen. Is it only showing up in social studies, or do we have other places where? So looking across the content areas and being interdisciplinary about it. And then the next step, and this is not done, this is just getting started, but collecting specifics. Okay, you've said that this is happening at this grade level in this content area. Now give us exactly what you're doing. So 7th grade language arts, debate in the GT group, forum and public speaking, that's a specific program, and so forth. So that's just one example. So this will be ongoing for the rest of the year. Hopefully somewhat tightened up by the end of the year. Let's see. Any questions so far? Yes, Pete?
I do, and it actually goes back to the beginning when we were talking about the math. I'm curious about the MEAs. Do we get any kind of data other than just like raw scores from MEA? Do you get any diagnostics like this is where people are missing things, or?
Right, so we get the raw scores came out around the end of October, I think, if I remember right. And then the more specific student data was released, the website was released right after Thanksgiving. So you can go into a student and then look at how they did overall in a content area, but also within the strands. So you could say, well, they're average in math overall, but they have a weakness in geometry. Or their score is low in math, and it seems that number sense is where they're really struggling. So then the timing of it is not ideal. It would be nice if the teachers had that information when the year started.
Right.
Because we do the NWAs late September, usually, and those scores are immediate. They have them the next day. They can start using that to help them understand which kids need help with what. But the MEA is kind of a long way from, they take it in March and April. We get the scores in late November.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's not that it's not helpful in some ways, but per kid, it's not that helpful because they're 6 to 8 months away from when they, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I was just curious if, like, that 5th grade class in particular, whatever, if you were able to use that data from MEA to say, all right, this class is struggling with geometry, or is it just all across the spectrum?
I think by the time we had the individual scores to look at, the breakdown of it, we kind of already figured out, using the other data, where to focus. But hopefully in the future it would be more readily available earlier in the school year. Because it's different tests. I mean, you have to, in the MEA, you have to write out your answer, so to speak. You have to explain your thinking in language. Whereas on the NWA, you've got 4 choices, and you're perhaps trying to figure it out ahead of time, or perhaps making an educated guess. So that there's a little more depth that's required on the MEA. Right. And we've also seen the complexity of what 5th graders are being asked has gone up quite a bit. A little scary. When you see the 5th grade test, you go, wow, I didn't learn that in 5th grade. So the difficulty sometimes with new initiatives and new priorities is that we just kind of inadvertently lose track of some of the things we said were important a year or 2 ago. So, learner-centered and proficiency-based instruction is still alive and well in both of the schools. And we inadvertently or accidentally, perhaps, some of the things we're doing to respond to deficits in math or helping kids with writing is actually, to me, learner-centered and proficiency-based. We're grouping and regrouping kids, we're designing interventions, we're allowing for voice and choice and how they demonstrate their knowledge and different ways to do instruction that might be more student-centered. So it's not like it's gone and forgotten. It's very much kind of embedded. And hopefully that will continue. So we have a belief statement that I've shared many times, and a couple of the key points in that are really about proficiency-based. Students should be able to articulate what they are supposed to know and be able to do. So they know what the targets are. They're not just doing an activity, they actually know what it's for. Sorry, I didn't include this, but I'm just giving you some highlights. Students are tracking their own progress against those targets and goals. They're reflecting on those. They can connect how an assignment or activity is part of the broader performance indicator or standard. They receive frequent relative formative feedback specific for them. They get various types of instructional practices. And like I said before, mistakes are inherent to the learning process, and it's a growth mindset, which is student-centered in my opinion. So just want people to know we haven't kind of lost sight of that, or is that something we used to do? No, it's something we still do. And the last thing is, we spent a lot of time last year looking at childhood trauma, adverse child experiences, how to help and support kids, how to understand the effects of that. And so we're not spending a lot of time with that other than a few check-ins along the way, and just maybe I float an article out once in a while to say, don't forget about this. Did some training with our new folks prior to school starting, because you're trying to trying to bring them up to speed on something that took 8 or 9 months intermittently the year before. But they have lots of people around them to help them. So that's ongoing at both schools, is to just stay connected to that work. So we have a student assistance team at Jordan Small Middle School that really looks at a number of indicators, and quite often we find that some of the kids who are struggling the most have some of this background that they're dealing with. So how do we, kind of look at the whole student, the whole kid, and support them in whatever way we need to. So it might have to do with their attendance, things are going on that prevent them from getting to school, or it might have to do with behaviors, self-regulation type things, academic gaps that occurred when they were in, a stressful year in their life, and that's kind of followed them along, and they need help. So we're always looking to how to proactively find problems before they get too big, and then when we do identify problems, to come up with plans for kids, whether it's through special ed, 504, the student assistance team, intervention plans, whatever it takes. And Beth will tell you more about the RTI process at RES too. But before she takes over, any questions about Jordan Small? Questions? If something comes up along the way, just shoot me an email. So we're really happy to have Beth Peavy with us. She's been able to really focus in on helping staff with instruction and practices that, Mrs. Hutchinson had 2 hats, if you may recall, at Raymond Elementary School. She was guidance counselor and assistant principal. It is not an easy task. So we now have Martha Stone part-time, thanks to your support last year. And she's got the guidance piece, and that allows Beth to really focus on instruction and supporting staff in whatever they need. So you've heard enough of me. Won't be far away.
Stay right here. I just want to say I can't believe we're almost at the halfway point this year already. I didn't think we were there already, but there's been a lot going on in the schools. We've been really busy. And I'll start out with math practices in our school as well. All the teachers, K through 4, are incorporating number talks in the classroom. So that's really probing questions for students and getting them to think about problems and having different ways of thinking for their mathematical processes, and listening to the children give their the way that they're envisioning how they could solve a problem, so because there's multiple ways. And sometimes our programs can show more than, will show one way, but when you have number talks with students, the students are often coming up with a strategy that we wouldn't necessarily use for math, but it brings up conversation and it has other children think about mathematics in different ways. Our 4th grade team does have the new everyday math program, like Mr. Crockett said, with one of his teachers at JSMS. The program is aligned with Common Core, so the program also has more language. It's a really language-based program with it. There's much more vocabulary, there's more word problems, so students are having to apply their mathematical knowledge and more realistic situations. So math problems tend to be a challenge at all grade level for students because you have to use maybe different math concepts in one problem. You have to figure out what it's asking. So the teachers have been working diligently with actually Patty Rado, our math coach for the district, on how to bring those lessons to students that are have deficits in math that we've looked at through the NWA, and how to instruct them. So some of the areas, along with our special ed coach we have in the building, pre-teaching the skills is a intervention that we've put in place for the students, teaching the vocabulary, and then breaking down the steps and solving problems for the students. We are looking at the NWA data And we've done that several times as a 3rd and 4th grade group. And I do really appreciate that we have the NWAs, because you actually, when you go into the program, you can pull your students and see what RIT band score they received, and by strand, which means you can break it down and narrow it down to which area of maybe geometry that they're struggling in, and aligning it with the everyday math program. So if a teacher is teaching the everyday math geometry unit, they can look at their student scores and areas where they scored in on the NWA, and the NWA will give specific skills that they can work on at their level. So, and that helps to decide what pre-teaching you may need to do with some students so that they can access that information when the instruction is actually being taught in the classroom. So there's push-in support by special ed, as well as pull-outs. So we have a lot of things going on in 3rd and 4th grade with that. Writing with Lucy Calkins, units of study. As Mr. Crockett indicated, that it is a K-4 implementation. We do have some teachers that are, as he mentioned in his school, at 3 years in, they started the first year really implementing the program. We have some at the 2-year level, but we have Melissa Bois, who's been coming in and more than just providing the professional development on Wednesdays, she goes into the classrooms and will observe or support or co-teach with a teacher and give them feedback and instruction. So I've seen that in several classes with at the lower level with 3rd and 4th grade, and especially with 3rd grade, she's working on the scope and sequence of the program, making sure we're getting each unit of study for Lucy Calkins in by the end of the year. And the Lucy Calkins writing program has a lot of information for each lesson. So sometimes it's difficult to extract the pertinent information, what is the gist of the lesson. So she's provided that support for some of our teachers so that they can really implement this program and feel comfortable. And just looking at what some of the anchor charts that need to be created, what is the timeline for the units when it should be completed and moved on to the next unit, and just being a support for them. She meets with our 3rd grade teachers every couple of weeks, and as well as observe in the classroom and models. So that's been a great added benefit, and I think they're feeling more comfortable with the program because it is, everybody has their strengths, and some programs are easier to take on and explore with and feel comfortable with, and some can be a little bit more challenged. And so she's actually made it a little easier for the teachers. She is also working with the teachers on, in the Lucy Calkins writing program, they have a scoring continuum, and making sure that teachers have clear understanding on how to score the on-demand writing so it's consistent. So she's worked with our teachers in group, but we're also doing that district-wide. And next month, teachers K1 and 2nd and 3rd grade will be meeting as a district and calibrating scoring. So there's common scoring practices going on across the district, which is great. 90% reading goal. I have to say the teachers have worked really hard. I'm sure everywhere across the district, but our kindergarten 90% reading goal, I guess, began last year with our kindergarten students. So now this year they're in 1st grade. So the goal was for this year, it would be kindergarten teachers and 1st grade teachers implementing interventions for our students. But we have 2nd graders. We had quite a few 2nd graders who were below grade level in literacy. And Carrie Thurston, who's a consultant that meets with our teachers, she comes every few weeks. Sometimes she comes on a Wednesday just to visit classrooms and then sit down with our group and do professional development or look at where students are and look at the data. Other times she'll come in our school and just visit the classrooms and really check in with certain students and then provide feedback to teachers on what they can do. But at the beginning of the year, the data just shouted out for our second grade group really needing a lot more support. But the second grade teachers were not part of the 90% goal yet. It would have been just our kindergarten and first grade teachers. We presented the data and we showed where students were at a meeting, and Carrie led that meeting. And pleased to say our second grade teachers wanted to team with the first grade teachers and come on board with the interventions that Carrie Thurston also provides some lessons for the teachers to do with the students. And so it's really a K2 90% goal right now for us. All of the teachers are working on this. Our intervention blocks, I welcome any of you to come and visit because it's impressive to see. It's flexible grouping, so every about 25 school days we have assessments completed, and then we determine what the next level of interventions are for students, and then we divide them up into different classrooms. So there's different levels of literacy skills that they'll need to be working on. So because of the interventions, we have students that are beyond their grade level that are being challenged, and being able to read at higher levels and having that time with teachers for direct instruction. So we have first graders that might be at the end of a second grade level. And so for end of second grade reading, that's typically they have to do a writing piece for their retell. So they're actually getting instruction from their teachers on how to do that. Whereas typically if they're all in your classroom, you don't always have that time to be able to put into working with one-on-one with students that might be ahead. So this gives them an opportunity 4 times a week, 45 minutes to be really challenged in literacy. For our students in the other classrooms, especially at the kindergarten level, you could walk in, you might see them singing vowel songs. We have students, we're working on crossing the midline. We're checking if they're tracking abilities because that impacts reading, and so we have interventions for that. We're doing phonemic awareness activities, quick writing, the letter sounds, writing a sentence or a word. So there's a variety of activities going on in this classrooms. I really welcome you to come and see it because K2, it's very, yes?
Just to be 4 times a week, is that every day but Wednesday?
Yes.
Because last time I came was the off day.
Come on the on days.
I'm trying to remember, it's kind of like, if you came another day, okay.
Wednesdays are our progress monitoring days. So for intervention, we flood our classrooms with the interventionists, the ed techs, Title I ed techs. So they go in where the highest needs are in the classroom. So a teacher will start the lesson whole group. So they're doing either letters or sounds or vowels. They do a movement activity, and then they break into centers. And every center has a skill-based activity, and then they rotate through. Teachers have created a lot of materials. And so today they spent time, they should have been spending time looking at each other's materials. They went into a lot of discussion about our intervention, and they're at a very good place right now because when you take on a new challenge as this, it doesn't always feel comfortable. And our teachers are feeling comfortable with what they're doing with their students and impressed with the gains that they're making. Even if students are below grade level, they're still making gains. And so we're celebrating those accomplishments. So please come in on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
I'll remember.
Every 25 days or so, we look at the data and we do regroup them. And Carrie helps us with that. So we'll be completing our second round right before vacation. Carrie Thurston will be coming in next week and the following Wednesday to work with our teachers for the next rounds. We will be looking at the students that are really struggling and identifying exactly where and focusing in more skills specific to those students. And it's from the beginning of the year to now, our numbers are reducing in that area. I have one little bit of data. Our teachers are submitting the developmental reading assessment scores tomorrow. So if we were next week, I could give you those scores. But in comparison to our current second graders right now, we have 83% who scored at or above on their oral reading fluency in the past couple of weeks. But last year, that same group of students, they were at 69% that had scored at or above. So we are closing the gap with some of these children. And the goal is exiting second grade that at least 90% are at grade level or above for reading. Do you have questions? There's a lot that goes on with our 90% goal. No questions? Okay. RTI, so we have several new members to the RTI group, team, and me being one of them, and we have our special ed coach on there as well. So that's been a great, and Martha, our Mrs. Stone, our guidance counselor, that's been a great addition to the group because it gives a different perspective and ideas for problem solving for students. And response to intervention is any students that are having academic, social, attendance, behavioral concerns. RTI tends to focus around academics, but we are really branching out and looking at students that have executive functioning skills, deficits that need an intervention. And typically, you don't do that in the classroom level, but we've been able to put some tier 1 interventions in the classrooms for students to help with organization, focusing, and having students start to internalize and learn how to regulate themselves in the classroom. We have also added speech and language skills. We've had a couple of situations where we've gone through the RTI process for students that were not picked up before coming to kindergarten for speech and language. So we're finding this year, especially with our kindergarten class, we had quite a few identified with speech and language IEPs. So incorporating that into our intervention groups, because that oral language and receptive language is really critical for literacy. Because data shows also that students that have oral language deficits, if we don't attend to those at a young age, even though they may continue through K through 2 being on grade level for literacy, reading, developmental reading, in 3rd and 4th grade you may see that they do not progress in their reading because now they have to have higher comprehension levels, and they may not be able to have that receptive language for the comprehension or the expressive. So and then their scores, their reading levels do not continue to progress. So we're trying to make sure that we tackle that at the elementary level, K2 level. We have also added an ambassador program, mentor program. Students are paired with another student. It's a dual purpose. Usually we have younger students that may need support, like they don't go right to the breakfast quickly and coming back, and so we can add an older student to do that and help them with unpacking to move quickly. And this frees up our ed techs who would normally support students doing that. And so then our ed techs can get students from classrooms. We're not really grabbing students. Get students from classrooms and work on isolated academic skills. So if you have 5 or 10 minutes, we have one ed tech that's working on tracking with students, tracking activities. So we're doing a lot of different things. We're busy. And for some students, the older students, sometimes it's really hard to come to school. And we have kids that just don't want to come to school because they have a lot of worries. So if they have another student they can help out, it brings they feel accomplished, and it makes them want to come to school. They have a purpose. So we're pairing up both students. It's really nice. Exciting activities at RES. We have a sledding hill. I would like to thank Bill Hansen, our custodial staff, for opening up our 2 gates, fencing so that students can have a sledding hill, which has been closed down due to ice and no snow. We welcome snow on the weekends, but not during school, so that we can come to school. Maybe this will be a full week. But prior to that, we had a 3rd grade class, Mrs. Sears' class in Lucy Calkins writing. They have to do a persuasive writing piece. Their persuasive writing piece was to write to me that they would like a sledding hill and why, and all the good reasons. So they had some really good reasons. Exercise, some students don't have the opportunity to do sledding from their homes. Exercise came up a lot. It would give us more things to do outside at recess. So then I wrote them a letter back with 5 points, the constructed response right back to them. Clear beginning, middle, and end. So then we have the sledding hill. The kids, the 4th graders especially, have really enjoyed the sledding hill because they have to walk up, and it's really taken out a lot of their energy. We noticed this week there's a lot more energy in the building. The moon, the blood red moon, the blue blood red moon, and also the just not being able to get outside, so there's a little bit more energy. So little snow, sledding hill will be good. One of the other things we're doing in our school, we started January 16th, is the Olympic Reading Challenge. We are doing this until the day we get back from vacation. Students are awarded a medal if they meet the challenge weekly. So for the older students, they have to read pages, so 100 pages if they're in grades 2nd through 4th grade per week, or 80 pages or 60 pages. So they'll get a gold, silver, or bronze. And for the K1 classes, they have 10 books, 8 books, and 6 books. So every week they can earn a medal. And today we celebrated because we've been had 2 weeks already, the students have earned their medals, and we have 3 classes that are in 1st, 2nd place right now for the number of medals. So we also have in the hallway like a duplicate medal, so they're seeing a graph of each of the medals for each of the classroom in comparison, and just celebrating the reading. We welcome you to come in our classrooms and visit.
Even on Wednesdays?
You can come on Wednesdays. We might put you to work.
I have a question. I was interested because I'd just been reading about the executive functioning skills or lack thereof. And as I was reading about it, I saw myself very clearly as a kid, and especially the messy books and the notebooks and all that. So I was excited to see that you're doing that. And so you're doing that throughout your school, all of your classes? You have your teachers working on?
What we do, they always work on that in the classrooms, and that's with our standard operating procedures. What are the routines in the day? And they usually have a chart or pictures for the younger grades of exactly what they need to do for like unpacking in the morning or getting ready to go home. The challenge is for those few kids in each class, or the one student that just is not able to do that. So then often they'll come to me or our standard interventionist, Kathy Gillis, who's also initiated in putting in the Mentor Ambassador program together, and will brainstorm with us. And if it doesn't work and they're collecting data and the students still are struggling, then we have our RTI meeting and we come up with more plans, interventions. Really, sometimes you have to explicitly teach the skill and have like a chart for the student. Sometimes you have to have an adult to help them at first, but the goal is for them to intrinsically be able to take on those skills and do it themselves. But sometimes it really just takes teaching them so that they understand.
I think it's huge that you're looking at that, though. I mean, are we doing that at a district level? Was that something that you've kind of brought in? I don't know if I've seen that.
I don't know district level, and I'm sure they are, because this is an issue, a concern in every school.
Yeah.
Kids come in with emotional baggage that impacts them in the classroom. They maybe have not been taught
Some of
the
it's just the
skills.
wiring,
The
you know,
wiring, kids come in, they're dynamic.
Yeah.
So, it's important, before they can learn, some of these pieces need to be
Well,
put in
good.
place for
I'm
them.
excited to hear that you're doing that. I hope that feeds up through, if it's not already, into the other places and continues to grow, so good job.
I think our team, also for the RTI team, there's a dynamic group. We have people with a lot of knowledge and background. So our special ed coach comes in and she has extensive background with executive functioning skills at the special ed level.
Yep.
So then as our team, how can we do that at the tier 1 so that kids are not having to be referred to special ed? So our goal is always to, do as much as we can so that they're not being referred to special education.
And that's more prevalent to be taught in the special ed if you're in that training than if you're not in that training.
Right.
So they're more alert
Right.
to that. As
They have special ed programs. But so we try to do things, before that in the classroom. And it's developmental too. It depends on if it's a kindergartner versus a 4th grader. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question, if I could. Not so fast.
All right. This I can do.
I'm back on the math practices, and I think even Randy, you mentioned this too, that there's a new version of everyday math, but am I understanding correctly that not all grades are using the new version?
Correct.
It would have been cost prohibitive to try to gear up buying all those reference books all at once for every grade, K to 6.
Okay, so that was the reason was the cost?
Yeah.
Okay.
We looked at it, it was big.
So what is the plan then to get everybody on board, or is this considered a pilot?
Well,
That's going to be math committee recommendation, right? As to what series and all that.
Well, and I think the process right now is we have the consultant, Michael Hayes, come in, and he's going to be giving his recommendations.
Okay.
So I know he's met with teachers, he's met with admin, and he's in the process of writing up his recommendations, and we'll be submitting it to Sandy and Christine. And from there, decisions will need to be probably made as far as, is it really a program that will drive the change in how students tackle math? Or do we take the programs we currently have and how do we supplement? Because we really need to get, from some of the information he provided us, we really are at the skills level and concepts level, and sometimes we're having students apply with real life situations. So we need to find ways of being able to do that with students and stretch their thinking in math. And when you are providing those real life situations, they're using a variety of mathematical concepts. It's just not just doing computations. You're also using computations, you might be using fractions to solve a problem. But I think it'll be led by the audit information.
I guess I'm taking a step back. The decision to try the newest one was prior to us doing the audit, and so
Yes.
this was the direction we were going in, and so now, after we
That
did
would
the
be
audit.
you. Like Keith's budget.
You can't, they can't blame you for any of it, they blame me. So the question started to be asked, we have everyday math, we've been using it pretty, the way it was intended to be used.
Right.
And so, does the program not meshing with what's being tested on the MEA? That was the first question.
Okay.
So Christine and I had conversations about, well, maybe the sequence is different, or maybe the way it's presented is different. And so she did a quote for Raymond K to 6, and it was tens of thousands of dollars to go all in with because it's new reference books, new online access, new everything, plus workbooks. So we just couldn't bite it all off in 1 year. So I said, well, let's try it out. So I had one 5th grade math teacher who was like, yeah, I think I'll. And then the other one's like, well, I kind of know what I'm, so now we have a comparison there, perhaps. But 4th grade team was all in. They wanted to, so we were able to do it for those two and let's see what happens. Unfortunately, we may not know exactly what happens until we get that information in the fall. But
Okay.
Also, Mike will be coming to the board to talk about the audit and recommendations and stuff like that, so we'll probably continue to have that conversation as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I do real quick. I just want to acknowledge, I think you guys have a very unenviable task in that you have to balance, teaching the proficiency based and getting everyone the skills that they need and showing it on those tests. And I know you walk it's a balancing act to make sure you're not teaching to the test and you're actually giving the kids what they need. So I'm super grateful that we have the NWEAs, which seem to be a much more useful tool in diagnosing and kind of addressing. To me, it sounds a lot like you break a bone and you try to fix it 8 months later, you're out of luck. You got a crooked finger for the rest of your life. So I really just appreciate what you guys are doing and the effort that you make to make sure you're balancing it all. It's not easy, and I'm super grateful we have you folks to do it. So
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Next on the agenda is the vocational school budgets. And were you going to speak to that?
I'd be
Mr.
happy to.
Davis?
Thank you. So, and Marge, if you want to pipe in as well, but I would just say from a general standpoint is that there are Part 1 and Part 2 budgets to each of the schools, so Portland Arts and Technology High School as well as Westbrook Regional Vocational Technical Center. The Part 1 budget is your instructional component. It's the larger piece. The Part 2 is for equipment, things of this nature that's not human resource related. And the way that we pay for that is over a 2-year average. The expense is paid based on a percentage of the students that we have as compared to the size of the school. So that's what the motions are before you. There is regrettably a bit of an error on your very first motion, however, in that the number of 172,000 is actually this year's number. The correct number is 173,983.49. And I would also say, as you know, we've had some our executive secretary hasn't been in the office, and as a result of that, you have this pretty blue and white sheet that is a handwritten mock-up of what the numbers are, and hopefully that'll be a help to you. But Marge, I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, I have, and because we did not have access to tech, I couldn't get these printed up, but if you want to take it, it's in a different format that looks a lot easier to read. So if you just want to take a look at those too, it'll give you a better sense. It's in a chart versus
Oh, yeah, I think
spread out on the
173 looks
words.
better in a chart than it does on the paper and blue.
But basically, we're assessed
easier.
by the percent of our students.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Which is no different than it's ever been.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep, nothing has changed, and
I think we're at 6.09, correct?
and the other thing
Yeah.
that you'll notice, because with the PAS, the Part 2 cost, that's the capital piece of it. Excuse me. And on Westbrook, you can see there's listed as capital rather than Part 2. And those dollar figures have decreased almost every year. If we went back a few years, they were up like $25,000 to $30,000 each. So they have they've done a great job of going out to businesses and everything to get their equipment, who are helping to support them in whatever area they're working in, as far as like a bulldozer or stuff like that, which is very, very expensive. And of course, this is our piece being the fact of, if you look at the chart, depending on how many schools there and how many students they're using for a count is what the percent comes up.
Does anybody have any
So when it comes
questions?
back this way, you can take a look.
Yeah, Ann and I don't need to see a chart.
You need to see the chart.
You need the chart?
We don't need it, we'll glance at it when you get it.
No, he just wants to see it after.
All right, so we're going to need a motion to amend that first one.
Yeah, but I can't make it easy.
Hey, you got a
Wait a
question?
second, please.
Oh, sorry.
I think Pete's got questions.
turning.
The wheels are turning.
The wheels on the bus go round.
Well, no, I'm just, like, these sheets, they break out Part 1 and Part 2, and then have a total, whatever. And so I'm just wondering where this 173,983.49 is, because that looks like the total of part 1 and part 2 according to the sheet that Marge just gave me. So
I can't tell because you have it.
Yeah, I can't even.
Can I see it a minute?
there's part 1 and the part 2 costs. Because if you, on the motion as it is, if you add that
broken out.
172.
You're exactly correct.
Right, the part
You're
one,
exactly
the
correct.
part one cost is
Yes,
$172,000.
you're exactly correct.
$56.37.
The motion stands as it is.
Okay.
Oh.
Thank you for seeing that.
Thanks, Pete.
Paul, okay, you want to go back to look at it?
Well,
Are you
Eric
done
wants
looking
it.
at it?
Yeah, I'm okay. I trust him.
Do you want it, Eric?
Have they got the other one?
Dot, you
No,
wanna
it's too
look at
late. If I can't have it when everybody else has it.
Oh, my God, yeah.
They have 2 different parts going around here.
Curious.
Well, yeah, because one is one school and the other one
It
is,
is on the sheet on this explanation.
What, I'm sorry,
that's
Scott, I
Cass,
didn't hear.
this is Westbrook.
Yeah, I'll switch with the answer.
Scott, what did you have a question about?
The part 4 of this motion, the capital budget, where on the budget explanation is that?
That's the Westbrook,
That's the
number
Westbrook.
2.
It's this one right here.
I see it, yeah.
That
Thank
would be
you.
the bottom one.
Right.
Okay.
How much is it per student?
Wait a minute.
Does anybody have any other questions before we vote?
I don't.
You good?
And nothing else has changed, right? Is that what I heard correctly?
Right.
So nothing's gonna change.
Okay.
All right,
Yep.
then if somebody would be so kind.
I move to approve the RSU 14 portion of the Portland Arts and Technology High School budget paths, part 1, cost assessment for the 2018-2019, in the amount of $172,056.37.
Second.
All those in favor? It's unanimous.
I move to approve the RSU 14 portion of the Portland Arts and Technology High School budget paths, part 2 cost assessment for 2018-2019 in the amount of $1,927.12.
Second.
All those in favor? It's unanimous.
I'll move to approve the RSU 14 portion of the Westbrook Regional Vocational Center's operating cost assessment for 2018-2019 in the amount of $212,004.44.
Second.
All those in favor?
And I'll move to approve the RSU 14 portion of the Westbrook Regional Vocational Center's capital budget assessment for 2018-2019 in the amount of $3,315.79.
Second.
All those in favor?
I was gonna jump in, but I
And it is.
Don't worry, guys, we got this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, the
Sorry for
next,
confusion.
No, that's fine.
the next item on the agenda is our executive session to discuss the shared vehicle maintenance facility.
I move to enter into executive session in order to discuss or consider the condition, acquisition, or the use of real property, specifically a shared vehicle maintenance facility pursuant to Title I, Section 405(6)(c), and not return to regular meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? And it is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.